I'm Laura Cooks Books, and today I want to do a really important video. We're going to be looking at my 7 favourite books of 2017, because I thought about doing 10 and that didn't sound good, and I think if I said 17 books that I liked, it would have been all the books I've read this year, which is only a slight exaggeration. We're going to go in reverse order, but I only have a few of these books here in London with me. The rest I shall pop up as a little picture so you get to see the beautiful editions I actually own. Number 7 is a fairly recent read for me, and I am going to say it is The Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. I kind of can get away with using the whole trilogy because my edition is a bind-up and I listen to them on audiobook, but I'll be good and I'll just say the first book, The Northern Lights. It's my favourite book of the trilogy and I absolutely adore it. It's set in Oxford, but not in our Oxford. It is in a parallel universe. And in this universe, everyone has a little animal with them all the time called their demon, and it's actually part of their soul that they can hold and carry around and talk to and never be alone. I just think it's such a magical world, and the first book especially was so rich with details of that world and so well imagined, and I just absolutely adored it. I can completely understand the hype it gets on BookTube. This was a reread for me because I initially read them when I was like 11 years old, and I loved them even more as an adult. I understood so much more than I had as a child, which is really understandable because actually there's some big themes in there. There's a lot about the power of the church and about science and about where those two things intersect. Book number 6 is actually a bit of a weird one. It's Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. And I wasn't really expecting to enjoy this as much as I did, but as time passed, I've grown fonder and fonder of what I remember of it. This book follows a young journalist or writer as he's trying to research a book about where important people were the day the first atomic bomb, nuclear bomb? Big bomb fell. And he's trying to trace where the father of the bomb was, this really influential scientist at that moment. Unfortunately, he's passed away, so he has to go between this scientist's 3 children, and he goes back to his hometown, and loads of slightly weird, unsettling things happen because it's Vonnegut. And in a twisted turn of events, this journalist ends up going to a country that I can't remember the name of. It's not a real country. And when they land, he ends up becoming president of this country. It's weird and it's twisted and I love it because it's just so bloody Vonnegut. And of course the apocalypse happens. At number 5 we have a book I can actually show you, and it's Post-Truth by Matthew Dannacona. Not Danaconda, as I normally say. I read this with Amy and Rachel when we started our own little book club about badass feminism, socialism, softcore communism, and this uses Brexit and Trump's election to kind of talk about the bigger idea of post-truth and what is truth and how do people fall for these narratives that the media and governments so eloquently set up for them. And it bills itself as a way to kind of fight against that and rally the troops. I do definitely feel that this was a rallying call. It got me really angry, really interested, and much more alert and critical in the way I consume media, which I already thought was a very critical liberal stance. But then I realised there was much more I could be doing. So in that, I think this was a really important book, and it opened me up to some of my own prejudices, I guess you could say. I don't consider myself to be a prejudiced person, but I know that my opinions are very strongly held and very little could shake me from them, and this kind of illuminated that for me, so I can understand how people on either side of that ideological rift from me might feel. Number 4 I read as an ebook, so I don't have a physical copy to show you, but it was also read with Rachel and with Amy as part of our book club. It was actually the first book we read that made us want to start a book club, and it is Chavs by Owen Jones. Guys, I have a full, very impassioned review about Chavs, and I would actually really enjoy it if you'd go watch it, because I don't have time to gush about this book here. It was phenomenal. It's the first non-fiction book that made me want to voraciously read non-fiction. It completely validated my experiences growing up. It made me realise again I had a lot of growth to do going forwards, and it gave me such a passion to want to change something, not just learn about it, but to really engage with it and just fuck shit up. We're getting into really good stuff now. Number 4 is a very special book to me. It is Hamilton the Revolution by Lin-Manuel Miranda and Jeremy McCarter. Just look at that for a second. This book follows the musical Hamilton from conception, when Lynn was just reading a book written by Ron Chernow, up until opening night and the speech Barack Obama gave a couple of months after that to do with the play and Hope. It talks about all of Lynn's influences in writing, all the stages of bringing the production to the stage. The stages of the stage. Nice. It talked about character development, musical development. It talked about writing rap music, which of course I've never considered before. It talked about casting a great deal and how they found the actors that were perfect for the roles and how sometimes they really struggle to get them. And it talks about how this musical was never a foregone conclusion that it was going to be a hit. And it kind of paralleled the fact that the revolution this is based on, it was not a foregone conclusion that the rebels would win. So it's packed full of historical information and just little tidbits about the musical that I'm obsessed with, and it's got lots of gorgeous, gorgeous photos of behind the scenes, in dressing rooms, actual photos of the production underway. It's got rehearsal photos, it's got photos of Lynn's original notebooks, and you can see where he crossed words out and switched one for another. And all the lyrics of the musical are in this book, and Lynn has annotated them with little notes about the writing of them, the performance of them, anything you can imagine is in here. And I actually listened to the soundtrack when I got to each set of lyrics and kind of sung along and read the footnotes. And it was just a really lovely experience, and the thing that makes it even better is the fact that this book was a gift, so I can treasure it always. I mean, I would have done anyway, but you know. Next we have a book that didn't necessarily make me happy, but it had a really profound impact on me. It's a non-fiction book, and it is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. This got hyped quite a while ago on BookTube, and it took me a little while to pick it up. I ended up reading it in the summer. It's about a man who's training to be a neurosurgeon and discovers that he himself has cancer, and that immediate flip from being the doctor to being the patient and feeling how his patients would have felt. He was a gifted writer. Some of these passages would have brought me to tears even if they weren't about a horrific illness. As someone who's lost a dad to cancer, it actually brought quite a powerful sense of closure to me, because during the course of this memoir, Paul had a daughter, and even though my dad was ill for quite a long time, we never really had a conversation about what would happen to me afterwards. However, he did leave me a letter, and a lot of the sentiments he left me in that letter, I could hear Paul saying at the end of this novel, and he said them very explicitly. And oh, here we go! And it was a great comfort for me to know and to have repeated what my... I don't know if I can finish this bit. It provided a great deal of closure to me, a great deal of comfort to know what my dad wanted for me in the future, and to see just as strongly here how much love there was there and how much love there still is. I'm going to stop because I can't say any more about this book without crying, and that's the exact reason I didn't make a review of this book, because it would literally take me 3 hours and I would have to piece together individual sounds where I'm not crying. But this is a really, really powerful book. Even if you haven't lost anyone to cancer, I think this is an important read. But if you have, it's going to break you and it's going to rebuild you in the most beautiful way. Shall we move on to the best book of the year? I think so too. The best book of the year was A Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. It's been a good few months since I finished this book, but I still can't quite put all of my thoughts into words. And it's really frustrating because I want to make a really big video or review talking about how much I love this book, and I just don't have the words. I thought I'd read books that were lyrical before. I was wrong. I have never experienced language work the way it did in this book. It was just absolutely beautiful. It was incredible. It was my favourite book of the year. For those of you who don't know, it's a piece of classic literature which discusses morality, and essentially a man sees a beautiful portrait of himself and he wishes the portrait could bear all the marks of age and sin he would encounter in his life instead of him, because he's a very young man with great promise ahead of him. And somehow this actually comes true, and at first he resents the fact that this beautiful painting becomes corrupted and he himself can walk as a freely virtuous man. But over time he becomes more and more debauched and does more disgusting things that are only ever hinted at, of course. For a long, long time, Jekyll and Hyde was my favourite book ever, because I was intrigued by this concept of the duality of man and the extremes of good and evil and what drove people between them, and if anyone could really be truly virtuous or truly evil, or if we were all somewhere in between. But Oscar Wilde did something very different. He said that we can only be somewhere in between. He threw open this dichotomy of good and evil into a full spectrum of emotion, and he reminded us that humans are inherently flawed. It's only our own personal extremes that matter. And he talked a lot about temptation and guilt, and if we could get away with things, would we actually do them? It's such an interesting character study. It's a human study. I love everything about this book. I mean, I've already spoken about language, but the language literally slowed down time as I was reading, especially the very first scene when we're in Basil's art studio and they first see the painting and the first temptation is laid. Time starts to feel like honey, like if you were wading through it, it would take you so long to get to the other end of the scene, because everything is so lavish and so languid and slow. It's just really sexy writing. By far one of the best classics ever written. I can't. There's nothing else I can say. It's beautiful, stunning. I adored it. I think I'm going to have to go away and have a bit of introspection about what my favourite book of all time is now, because I'm loath to part with Jekyll and Hyde as my favourite book. But it was kind of blown out of the water. So I guess those are my favourite books of the year. A lot of these books will make it onto my all-time favourite list of books, but I'm going to have to play around with the rankings a little bit. I feel a bit weird about making this video so early in the year. It is mid-December, but I have a readathon to go next, and my TBR has lots of really amazing, really hyped books on it, so this may change. As of right this moment, this is my list of favourite books, and I suppose I can keep you updated if anything changes. I hope you had some phenomenal books this year, and I wish you the best of luck in your reading in 2018. See you tomorrow.